Greetings, everyone. My name is Rebecca Geschwind, and on behalf of Campbell & Company, I'd like to welcome you to Fundraising in a Global World, engaging an increasingly diverse and international donor base. Before we begin today's presentation, I'd like to quickly review some logistics for those of you who may be new to Campbell & Company webinars. To ensure you have the best webinar experience possible, please follow these tips. Close any programs other than GoToWebinar that are running on your computer. Call in using a telephone instead of your computer speakers. Move your cell phone away from your computer. And if you experience any visual issues, you can send a chat to Campbell & Company. You may also contact GoToWebinar at 800-263-6317. Finally, today's webinar will last 60 minutes and you will earn 1 continuing education credit for your participation, which is good for certification with CFRE International. About an hour after the webinar, you will receive an email from GoToWebinars that will include a web address where you can download your certificate and a PDF of the presentation. And now I would like to hand it over to Shoshana Grammer. Shoshana?
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you all for attending. We're really excited to be able to share some insights and knowledge and expertise about international fundraising. It's a topic that's been getting a lot of attention lately, and not just from academic institutions. We are excited to be presenting Campbell & Company research, and we'll be speaking with 2 well-regarded professionals in the field. There's about 170 people on the call, and we're going to be polling you in a little while to find out where you're from, what kind of organizations you represent in the nonprofit sphere, and where you are across the country. We hope to make this interactive with you. As Rebecca said, there will be time to ask questions, and we'll be talking to you about after the call how we could keep the conversation going. Excuse me while I do this. Thank you. So on our panel today, we have, as I mentioned, 2 distinguished panelists. Both were recommended to us for this webinar for their breadth and scope of experience and expertise. We also really appreciate them coming in for their East Coast perspective, because as you'll see from some research that Campbell & Company did over the summer, we were presenting to a West Coast audience, and so we have some really good information in the white paper that you have a link to from the West Coast. But Steve and Ryan bring some really great East Coast experience and depth in this field. So I'd like to ask each of them to take 2 minutes to introduce themselves and share a few insights from their current position or prior positions that will give us some insight into their world of international fundraising. So I'd like to start and introduce you to Steve Staples. He's Executive Director of International Development at Princeton University.
Thanks, Shoshana, and it's a pleasure to be with everybody today. I'll just give you a brief overview about my role here at Princeton and then maybe some insights that I've picked up along the way. I manage Princeton's international fundraising team. There's 3 of us that travel internationally as frontline fundraisers. We have an administrative assistant as well. I've been traveling internationally for Princeton for the past 10 years. I personally cover South Asia, Pacific, and our high-level principal gift prospects in Europe. I have a colleague who handles North Asia, Latin America, South America, and Canada, and then another colleague who covers Europe. We don't have a significant presence in the Middle East and Russia, and our 2 primary markets are Hong Kong and London. You know, the 2 pieces of insight that I've picked up along the way is you can do a tremendous amount of research about prospects and individuals that you want to go see, but at the end of the day, really nothing compares to just going out and being on the ground in a particular region and talking with prospects. And the second is I've learned so much from colleagues like Ryan, and so I would encourage everyone to develop a network of peers who are doing similar work at similar institutions.
Great, thank you. Thank you, that's very helpful. We'll be talking about networking too with your peers later on in the conversation. So that's great insight. And Ryan Carmichael, as you can see, he's Deputy Vice President for Development at Columbia University. He's also worked for a smaller university as well as nonprofit organizations. So I know he'll bring some of that insight into the discussion. Ryan?
Hi there, everyone. Ryan Carmichael from Columbia. Right now I'm the Deputy VP for Development. I oversee all the main campus professional schools and our global efforts. For about 4 years before this role, I was doing the global fundraising myself, and now I'm more on the strategy side and working with the team. We also have, Columbia is very decentralized. There's 16 different schools, and every school has their own fundraising team. But on the global front, we have a central, regionally based team like Steve does that covers different regions. So we have someone who focuses on Asia, someone who focuses on Europe. We also have a network of global centers, and so we have someone who's in charge of raising money for those. And then my role is on the strategy, and I also work with some of our high-level prospects who I get to see, who mostly travel through New York, and I see them here.
Great, great. And you know what I like about what you both said is you know, you all were new to international fundraising at some point, and people here in the audience have a whole spectrum of, some are just starting to get into it, while others have a developed program and they want to take it to the next level. But as successful in our minds as we know Princeton and Columbia are, it's kind of refreshing to know that you don't have, you know, a staff of 25 on this, that you don't have carte blanche, that you have to make decisions just as a small shop has to do about resources and people's roles. So that was really refreshing to hear about what you all do and our impressions. So through this session, we're going to cover a few things. We're going to talk about the best practices from academic institutions, development teams, Ryan and Steve, and some research that Campbell & Company did, but it also is applicable to other markets. We know hospitals and healthcare are doing more and more with grateful patients who come to the country specifically for their expertise. We know that environmental organizations have donors from abroad. I read a statistic that in the year of our anniversary of the U.S. Park Services last year, that they had more visitors from overseas visiting. They had 39 million people, maybe more, 200 million people. Anyway, more came from overseas than in our own country. So that was really interesting. Of course, we're all part of one globe, so environmental is super important, and cultural institutions and more. So we'll talk more about that. We'll talk about the skills that all development teams must require to create and manage an effective international fundraising program. And we'll have some examples that explore all phases of developing and sustaining such an initiative. So while our white paper that we talk about explore cultural nuances of Asian philanthropy specifically, Campbell & Company plans to expand our geographic focus in future reports, webinar, and blog posts at Campbell & Company. And we're also going to use that forum to answer questions you posed today from in the blog and through emails to you. And all this information will be shared with you. But we want to start out by asking, you know, what kind of institutions are you from? So Rebecca's going to put up a poll right now. That you can share your information with us. Is that poll is now open? Will be open for a few seconds, and then we'll share that information in a little bit. But we want to look at, you know, why we're even looking at this subject. And basically, you know, it's because our society and our economy has globalized. And we welcome students, patients, our patrons, as I said, national park lovers, and more from all over the world. And as we redefine historical, geopolitical borders, and there's creation of wealth throughout the world, like we haven't seen before, crossing borders. And increasingly, our alumni are mobile, and they're living abroad. And some students are coming here, and we're going to talk more about that. More and more are coming here for an education. So more and more organizations are seeking support from their constituents living abroad. And as a firm, we noticed this trend, and we sought to learn more about how institutions have built their international giving program. So we set out to learn more about best practices from academic institutions to start with, and their efforts to increase their donations from beyond their borders. So we did some research. We got an advisory committee together from development professionals from colleges, universities, and independent schools. And they helped us develop some questionnaires. And we did an online survey, and we did personal interviews. We had a response rate of 65%. Only 54 respondents, so we know it's not statistically valid, but yet we learned a lot, and we'll share that with you. And as I said, we're going to expand that. And we did in-depth interviews from some people that the advisory committee gave us their names. Most of the respondents came from four-year private colleges and universities, followed by independent primary and secondary schools, day school and boarding school. And we'll talk more about how students are coming younger and younger to our schools. We interviewed people for the paper from UC Davis, Chadwick School, which is a K through 12 school in Southern California, but they also just opened up a full high school in South Korea. So they're Chadwick International now, where students can go to school in Korea and get an American education and diploma. We spoke with Woodside Priory, which is a boarding school in Silicon Valley, University of Hawaii, Caltech, UC Berkeley Law School, and two private universities, University of San Francisco and University of the Pacific. So with that information, we learned that the percentage of fundraising revenue came from those schools that they weren't raising a lot of money from their international constituencies, but they were raising some significant donations, and it all depended on how big their university is. So I want to get to who you all are. We have the results of the poll, and we found out that 62% of you represent educational organizations, 16% environmental, and 16% healthcare, 5% cultural. And I'm sorry, we could only have 5 things you could answer, so some of you are other. But I think we have pretty much there close to who's on the phone with us today. So thanks for taking that poll. And just really briefly, the reason that we were Pacific and California focused is because the first time we presented this was at a conference in California in San Francisco last month. We presented at University of San Francisco, and it was a conference in conjunction with CASE District 7. It was called a mini conference. And we had really significant people presenting on that panel. You can see from this slide who they were. These were just, fabulous presenters whose depth goes so far into international fundraising. These are the organizations that they represent now, but they come from different places, from Singapore and from Georgetown and Stanford and USC. So we hope that you'll look at that paper, and that will help also give you some suggestions on how to run your program. So just some perspective on why we talked about international students studying in the United States. And though this isn't a poll, in your mind, I hope you'll come up with a number that you'll think about, how many students are here in the United States? And we learned that there's been an 80% increase since 2000, right? 80%. So as we talked about, it is increasing more and more. Some schools have fully a quarter of their populations coming from other countries. That's not what they saw, in the last century, in the 1990s. Record high enrollment, 2014-15, almost 1 million international students were studying in the United States. And we continue to see that number. We don't have the number for 15, 16 yet, but I imagine we surpassed the million mark. We tend to think that these students are coming here to attend graduate school, as they have for many, many years. Universities and colleges, community colleges, we've seen a huge spike in community college enrollment, and some community colleges are saying up to 50% of their enrollment is coming from international populations. And we see boarding and day school enrollment. And what was kind of surprising to us was even elementary schools. There are a number of parents who are moving here. The mom moves here with their student as young as, K through 3rd grade. They set up residency in the United States. Dad stays overseas primarily because he's taking care of business over there. And they want their children to get an American education. They're doing this so that it's a different kind of education. It's more critical thinking, participatory, and they seem to do perhaps better when they get to American colleges because they had that background in American education. We're also seeing where parents are sending their students to live here in the United States with a relative, or they're even some people are setting up group homes where students as young as 5 and 6 are coming here to live in a group home and attend day schools. So we're also seeing grateful patients, as we mentioned. Anderson Cancer, St. Jude Children's Research, Cleveland Clinic has been known for accepting patients from all over the world. They come here for their surgery, they get world-class attention, and then they're grateful and they want to give to those organizations. And some of the largest donations have been made to some of these organizations. We saw Carlos Slim Hilu from Mexico made a $75 million gift to the Broad Institute in Cambridge, Cambridge, Massachusetts, for research. But, we focused, of course, as we said, on educational organizations. And you could see here some of the larger institutions that received giving from Hong Kong. That was number 1. And as Stephen Ryan said, we're looking more and more into other countries. And I think it was Steve who mentioned Russia, which is kind of a name of a country we haven't seen before in the last, it's cropping up in the last few years, and people are dedicating some of their staff to going to Russia from time to time. When they are going to London, Germany, Greece, they're also stopping off in Russia and doing some work there. The first gift that kind of came onto our radar was way back in 1995. It seems like a lifetime ago. But Gordon Wu of Hong Kong gave $100 million to Princeton University School of Engineering and Applied Science. At that point, 1995, it was the largest outright gift ever made from abroad to an American university. It's 21 years later, and every few months we hear about more transformative gifts that originated abroad. So as leaders in this arena, we saw that Steve and Ryan do cover a lot of countries, but let's talk about why we should focus on constituencies outside the United States and why we should start there. Starting with Asia, as we said, we learned that 20% of University of San Francisco students are from abroad, 17% of University of Washington students are abroad, mostly from Hong Kong and China. But why should we focus on Hong Kong as a start? We saw that most of the gifts came from there. So I'll start with Ryan. Perhaps you could talk to us about why you at Columbia tend to focus on Hong Kong.
Well, I think it's our second biggest population of alumni outside of the U.S. after London. So there's a huge group of alums for a small population. There's more of a Western style of philanthropy, I think, in terms of people understanding the approach and having the flexibility with their money to make gifts. We've also established a foundation there to accept gifts for Columbia that people can make and get a tax benefit, so that helps us. So I think it's just somewhere that's been making a lot of money for the past couple decades and overlaps with the culture of people understanding giving back.
Good. Thank you. Steve, do you want to add anything to that?
I think Ryan, hit the nail right on the head. It's really a confluence of many important factors, really. There's deep resources in Hong Kong. There's a Western style of philanthropy, as Ryan indicated. And for us, specifically as an institution, we have the tremendous example and leadership that Sir Gordon Wu established in 1995 with his transformative $100 million gift. And so, as you can see by the previous two slides, Hong Kong still remains our primary market outside of the U.S., but there's a lot of factors that make it really the most attractive market for us outside the United States.
Great, great. So you talked a little bit about understanding philanthropy. And I think that one of the things that we learned from this study is that you both represent, four-year schools, you have graduate schools as well, but that your students who attended Princeton, Columbia, or the other schools that you've worked at, they kind of have they've been immersed in kind of the Western culture, and many of their families speak English, even if they are from other countries, Thailand and Jakarta and mainland China, Taiwan. Have you found that when you create your plans for working overseas, can you talk a little bit about the cultural nuances of how you adapt to talking to your alumni in Hong Kong or London or South America? We'll start with Steve.
Sure, happy to. Obviously there are cultural nuance and differences wherever we go in the world. The good news is that when we're dealing with alumni, whether they're undergraduates or graduates, they've spent a minimum of 4 years on campus, and so they have a really good sense of obviously how higher education in the United States work, and then how we as an institution approach fundraising. When dealing with parents, for example, that's when a lot of additional factors come into play. I think the biggest point is not to be afraid to go out and it's not a democracy. You sort of have to go out and follow where you think the money is going to be, and obviously having cultural respect is incredibly important, but also I think that we're afforded a great deal of latitude and flexibility simply by the fact that we're making an effort to understand their culture, and we're traveling and we're coming to see them often, in their home or in other parts of the world, and so there's a great deal of appreciation for that. And so, I certainly have a great deal of respect for the different cultural nuances that exist. But I think simply being out in the world is really what carries the day in terms of the significance of the university reaching out to individuals, again, whether they're students or parents. Perfect.
Great. Thank you. And when we go, you all, Ryan and Steve, just please feel free to jump in here. Now you talked about a centralized, decentralized office in your development office, and I know that Ryan was saying that there are many different colleges at Columbia that have deans, and deans are traveling, and they're doing their own work. And the nice thing about that is, though they work very independently, there is visibility abroad. And so Ryan, you talked about that you have an office in Hong Kong. So and I don't know that Princeton does that, but we do need to build a presence at all levels abroad. And for boarding schools who might be on the phone as well, when you send someone abroad, they're doing alumni relations, they're doing admissions work, they're doing fundraising, or at least, bringing the relationship closer to the university from abroad. And so we also try and get perhaps some local media when you're going abroad, talking about using social media and gathering your people together. So starting with Ryan, can you talk about some ways that you've worked with trying to build the best way to build volunteer leadership in the countries that you go visit and that you're targeting for fundraising, and you know, how do you find people, and how important is it to have a group overseas working with you and for you?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's important to have a big group, but I do think you need to find an anchor person or two in each country or city that could be your sort of liaison, because they can help you navigate the finer points of, you know, cultural things, or they can also help even, you know, review lists of alumni to let you know who they know is wealthy or who comes from a family of wealth that you might not know about. So I think starting by finding a go-to person who hopefully is a person of wealth themselves, who would help you both by giving, but also being the sort of person who can help you get in the door with other people and be a good role model, if you will, for philanthropy, I think is pretty critical. Otherwise, it'll be hard to sort of get it started on your own.
Very nice. So you find that one person or two people who can open some doors, make some introductions, and be your partner, if you will, over there that you work with.
Yeah, if you have, you know, Columbia's got alumni clubs around the world, so often the alumni club leaders could be helpful places to start, even if they're not big donors themselves. They've already sort of committed to giving time back, and they can help you develop lists on who you should be focusing on.
Great. Have you found how do you research when someone says, oh, you ought to speak with so and so? You know, this person is someone that you ought to go visit with. Do you use research tools here? Do your research people at your university spend much time with that, or is because it's overseas a little harder to get and you rely more on referrals from your network over there? Steve?
Well, go ahead.
Yeah. Steve.
Yeah, you know, absolutely. We have a robust group of researchers here, but you know, information internationally is harder to obtain, and so I think that our our research group does a good job of kind of the pre-screen, I guess you will, of folks that we should think about having on our list, and then I rely heavily on local knowledge and expertise about the significance of that wealth. And to sort of double back to the point about volunteers, we use volunteers in a very similar way as it sounds like Ryan does. In our more developed markets like London and Hong Kong, I'll have, you know, someone who's a graduate alum who's plugged in on to the graduate scene. I'll have an undergraduate alumni volunteer. I'll have a parent volunteer. And then in other places that maybe your secondary or tertiary markets, you know, if you have one agent on the ground, you know, I think of Bangkok, for example, or Singapore or Tokyo or Seoul, you know, having one person to go to, whether it's hosting an event or whether it's asking them about, you know, someone's wealth and their interest in maybe making a gift to the university. Having those folks on the ground is incredibly important. And I think a lot happens behind the scenes as well. And so this individual may help set up a meeting or set up a visit, but also I know that conversations are happening while I'm not there, you know, behind the scenes about how to support the institution, and you know, someone who's maybe a new prospect relying on, you know, the parent volunteer, for example, who's been through this and done this for their guidance and expertise.
Excellent. Good. So one thing we did want to find out, we're going to put a poll up here and come back to it, is for the people listening, is how do you all conduct outreach with your international donors? So that poll is going to be open for a while, and there's a lot of questions there, but we're going to ask you. You know, I think a target we talk about targeted fundraising trips, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit because that's what our research at Campbell and Company showed, but we'll see what the poll shows us in just a couple minutes. We did talk about alumni, and they got some Princeton and Columbia cute things there. Parents of students is an area that certainly is very important for independent schools. Though we have your students here for 4 years, they're getting a fabulous American education. We probably only see the parents when they drop off freshman year and they come to graduation. So going there is super important. And I was kind of interested to see that you all are kind of the same way at universities. And so talking to parents before the students are alumni to talk about your priorities at the universities, they're becoming some of our best donor prospects. So can you all talk about what you do face-to-face when those parents are here to start the conversation going when they drop off their kids freshman year, and then how you keep, not everybody has a budget to go overseas, so what are the things you all do to keep the conversation going in between your trips abroad? Steve, can you start by talking about that a little bit, what you do?
Yeah, certainly. And we even start, in some cases, even earlier than that. We have welcome events in London and Hong Kong, and so usually after students have made their decision to attend Princeton, there's an opportunity to meet new parents in the spring, even before their son or daughter matriculates. We also attend the International Student Orientation here in late August when students are, when parents are dropping off their students. And so, with parents, we try and develop relationships as early and as often as we can. We feel that the 4-year window of time is a relatively short period of time on the capital gift side, and so we want to establish those relationships as quickly as possible. It makes it easier, and it's then less reliant on us to get out individually to see some of these folks, because some of them are in faraway places, like New Zealand, and it may not be on my strategic plan for the year to go to New Zealand, for example. But if I've met that parent while he or she is here, then I can begin to establish a relationship that I can maintain via email or by the phone. And so, I recommend, as early and as often as you can.
Awesome. Good. Brian, any comments on that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly how we approach it too. And I think we also, I think trying to capture them at least once in person so that you can have this relationship that you can build on, through email and phone calls is critical. One thing that we have, which I think most schools do nowadays, is like a parents' council. And for us, we try to get the international parents on the parents' council as soon as possible, because it's a symbolic way for them to feel connected, even though they're maybe not coming to the meetings. Psychologically, I think it means a lot for them, for the sort of prestige or the feel-good factor to be a part of this. And then it gives you an excuse to be in touch with them more often. You're going to brief them on the parents' council meeting they missed, or the dean wanted to brief them on this or that happened at the parents' council. So to get them feeling like an insider through something like that right from the beginning is helpful for the 4-year relationship.
Excellent. Good.
I would just like to add that I would like to thank our independent school colleagues who are on the phone or on the line with us, because they do a great job of training a lot of these parents. So by the time that they come to Princeton, they're well-versed in philanthropy, and it makes the conversation that much easier and streamlined. So thank you.
I'm sure they appreciate that. There is a quote from the director of development at Woodside Priory School in Silicon Valley who said, those programs whose representatives went out year after year and talked to people and sat down and explained to prospects what was happening, those are the ones that succeeded. She said, if we skipped a year, the money wasn't coming in, and it would be much less. So it was really important for them to, as expensive as it was, to have a presence there every year. And for those of us who, children have gone off to school, they don't tell us what's going on, right? So, and certainly not their teen years, and then again in college. And when you live far away, tens of thousands of miles away, having someone from the university being a link to your son or daughter is so meaningful. As you mentioned, even if it's on the phone, talking about you missed the meeting, sorry you missed the meeting. Let me tell you what's going on here. So, Rebecca, do we have the poll results for how people do effectively communicate? She's sharing them now. Thank you. This is what we found in our Campbell & Company's research on the methods that you use which are most successful. And of course, the targeted fundraising trip we learned was most successful. But we did learn that a number of people do communications in multiple languages. And we have found when in our research that though the parents have different levels of English proficiency, sometimes that comfort level to have a letter in English on one side and their dialect on the other side is very respectful and showing them that you want to go where their comfort levels are. Sometimes taking a translator with you or offering them a translator when you go visit is a sign of respect and a sign, like you said, that you're making the effort to have communications with them that are deep and are authentic. And then some people also use social media to communicate as well, because more and more people are using not just WhatsApp, but some of the social media apps that originate in the countries of where they come. So I'm not seeing those poll results right now, but that definitely could be me. So I'm going to move on and come back and see how you all are communicating with you. So we talked about face-to-face meetings. Here in the United States, we tend to do peer-to-peer fundraising. Someone gave a large gift to a capital campaign, and we set them up with the information, and they go with us or maybe the president. But a peer is in the room traditionally when you're making these asks, and it's usually based on individuals. Like, this is what I'm doing. Won't you join me in supporting this university or this art organization? And we learned in our research that sometimes social status and cultural hierarchy plays more of a part in that overseas, that you may come from a country where the family makes the gift, and you want to go to the patriarch or the matriarch of that family, and depending on what they give, that then depends on what others in the family give. So going back to social cultural landscape for just a minute, do you think that in your experience, what are examples of how best fundraising principles are universal when you go overseas to Europe and to Asia? So Ryan, can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think especially overseas, my experience is that it's mostly about building the relationship where they trust you and see you as their link to the organization or the school. And I think once you've gotten there, then the gifts flow. And not that that's not true in the U.S. also, but I think like I travel a lot to Turkey. Half of the job is just getting to know them, having them like you, and having them trust you. And yeah, you talk about the priorities of the school and that kind of thing, but it's more about once you've gotten to a place where they know you and they see that you're committed to coming back, and you're just not just popping in and asking them for a gift the first time you meet, then you build this level of rapport that's what tends to pay off in the big gifts then.
Mm-hmm. So, and that's really fundamentals of fundraising. Putting your authentic self out there, getting to know each other, building trust, listening, finding out, being donor-centric. What are they interested in learning more about? Where does where would they want their support to go, and matching it up with the institution's priorities? Steve, any comments on that?
No, I couldn't agree more with Ryan. The only piece that I would add is that strong and enduring relationships take time to build, whether you're in New York or Mumbai, right? And so what I try to impress upon our leadership here at the university is that to Ryan's point, you can't sort of just pop in and make an ask and then not come back. And so it takes time to develop these relationships. And so managing expectations, here on campus are equally important. Just to say, look, we're building, a fundraising presence in this part of the world. And yes, the gifts will come, but it will take time for that trust to be established.
Right. So taking time is a really good segue into the work you do, and when you bring your president or chancellor or your head of school with you. Because we know that CEOs like to meet with CEOs, but there's a lot of work that happens before you bring that person, and you want to probably make sure that it's going to be a successful meeting before you go visit. And I did get the poll results, and the people in the audience are in agreement with what our research said and what you two said, that 60% do use targeted trips when they're fundraising overseas. 16% have internationally based clubs or affinity groups overseas that help them, and 15% are using social media, which is fantastic. So in talking, wait, I'm on the wrong thing, sorry. Technical difficulties. So how often should you visit? When do you bring the president, chancellor, head of school, executive director of your organization? When do you guys do that? And how do you think institutions with lesser resources can move forward with a program seeking international philanthropy and leveraging those heads of their organizations, but maybe not traveling as much? So let's start with Steve. When do you bring in the president?
I try and do pre-screens. I actually don't use the president here in terms of as a door opener or for introductory meetings. I try and see these folks on my own and then introduce our president to individuals who I think could make a significant gift to the university. One group that I do use in the pre-screen process is members of our board of trustees. I think that they are very good at identifying, who can potentially make a gift of that size, and can also then help communicate the information back to the president. And so the president is very receptive to what we're telling him as a development office of who we think are our top prospects. But to have some members of the board relay that information as well, I think makes the case very compelling. And so, I try and wait until I have a very good sense of someone before introducing them to the president.
Right. Let me ask you about your board of trustees, following up on that. If you have a board member who goes, say, to Hong Kong very frequently, or some places that you don't travel to as frequently, would you bring them into the fundraising strategic planning and have them perhaps have a portfolio of people that they're cultivating when they go overseas?
Absolutely. I have 4 or 5 board members now who travel significantly internationally, and we're in contact constantly about prospects and individuals who they might see, and whether I'm there or not, they're so good at this that they really have a good sense about who can make a gift and can really advance the conversation. So I work closely with a handful of members of the board who can do this and do this very well.
Fantastic. Would you say your strategy then kind of mirrors your domestic strategy in terms of how you use your president, how you manage his or her expectations about international fundraising?
Well, I mean, for Columbia, I think managing expectations is important to say, because Steve referred to it earlier, but you can't go into, although there's a lot of money overseas right now globally, And so people see dollar signs and say, okay, yeah, we'll send you over and you're going to bring back millions. Unless you're going to be committed to sort of for the long haul, a lot of these places are sophisticated enough that they're used to people popping in, asking them for money and leaving with no real commitment to developing a relationship or really having a strategy on international engagement. So I'd be careful about that, because a lot of deans see this as a quick fix that they could help their budgets. And I think if you're not committed, it really shows through. On the other point with that Steve made, which I agree, I don't think you should bring in anyone high level until you already know who's there and who's going to be likely to give. We have found even, for us, there's even different geographies that we're engaging now for the first time ever. And the people who go on these trips are, they're not the deans or the presidents, they're just development staff. And their outreach emails, are clear, like, look, we haven't done much with Canada before, and we're really trying to build a Canadian presence. Can I come and meet with you to hear your thoughts on how we can do that more? And she got meetings with all the really high-level people who maybe wouldn't normally, in the U.S., you wouldn't get that meeting as a development officer maybe. So I feel like people are so hungry for engagement that there's a really nice window that you could take advantage of, where you come to bring news from the university, and I think you'd be surprised at how many meetings you get.
That's fabulous. That's great. I like that, and you're also growing your development staff, right? They're getting that international experience, much earlier, which we'll talk a little bit about investing in staff a little bit later. So that's really good. I think that there are some trepidations. We talked about managing expectations. So we have a poll that we're going to ask people to talk about now. That what are your obstacles to growing your international fundraising? You all who are in the field, what is it about international development that's holding you back from being the best you could be? So we're going to open that poll for a few minutes, and we'll share some of the research that we did at Campbell and Company. My thing working? Hold on, please. Oh, because I'm on the wrong thing. Here we go. So we found out budgetary restrictions were the largest deterrent or primary obstacle for growing international fundraising. It costs a lot of money, obviously, to go overseas. And like you all said, and if you could spend a minute about targeting where the money is. You said it's not a democracy, and I love that, because you'll get someone who lives in Portugal, and say, oh, how come we don't hear from you here in Portugal? So you do need to go where the money is, and you do need to go where you think you're going to have the best return on investment. So when you're doing your strategic planning for the year, and you talked about opening up Canada as a new place, or some people are opening up Russia, where do you go to determine where your best return would be? Do you want to start with that, Ryan, at Columbia, how you guys determine?
Well, I think it's two things. One, you have to have a critical mass enough to justify a trip, because if you're going to go and you've only got 10 prospects in a whole country, that's going to be hard to justify a multi-day trip over there. So that's why a place like Hong Kong is nice. It's so compact, and we have 2,000 living alumni there. That's really rich. On the flip side, we also build trips around sort of not just wealthy people, but like the mega wealthy people that would be worth justifying. Let's say there's Thailand, there's only 8 prospects in the whole country, but all 8 of them are multi-billionaires. Okay, so that's worth a trip, even though there's not many other people besides those 8 to see. So part of it's sort of where the masses are, but then the other part's really focused on who are the really, really big fish that could pay off in a big gift.
Perfect. Right, exactly. Kind of like when you're doing, even here in this country, there's some programs for inclusion for everybody, the annual fund, And then there are some programs that are really going to be transformative gifts, and those are the ones that you want to, spend the time and money on trying to attract. Our poll said the same thing. Budgetary issues were the same. Staffing restrictions, 25% said that was some of the issues. Coordinating efforts and developing and maintaining expertise, staffing was also pretty high. It's good to know that you all, even though in our minds you have huge budgets and huge staffs, we're finding out not necessarily the case, and that you do have to make those choices as well regarding how you spend your money, the university's money, and where you go to find those large donations. I'm assuming Princeton is the same. You kind of look at where the wealthiest people are and where your critical mass is.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with what Ryan outlined. As an example, we had a junior member of our team back in 2013. We said, look, there's some markets that we just don't know a lot about, and so we're going to spend the year sending you there to find out as much as you can. And so that's what he did. He traveled essentially for a year and went to all these places that we'd never been, and as important, I think, is deciding where you're not going to go and where you're not going to put resources, and that can be tricky because you have to manage those expectations on the front end. You have to say prior to your trip, let's say to Mexico City, look, we're just here really exploring, this market, and hopefully people will understand, but you can't set expectations that you're going to be coming back even at all. And I know that, again, going back to it's not a democracy point, can be a sort of a difficult conversation to have with someone, but it's important to sort of manage those expectations on the front end so that there aren't expectations that, oh, you'll be coming back every 6 months or you'll be coming back every year.
Right. So so do you say, I would suspect you say to those people, when we have critical mass, we may be coming back. But in the meantime, my door's open.
Yeah, absolutely. Call us, email us. If there's any interest in us, we can send you information about any of the programs that we're currently hosting at the university. But yeah, just to say on the front end, we're really doing this as an exploratory tour, so they know what to expect.
Excellent. Then you're setting expectations internally to your board of trustees and the president or whoever is looking at your budgets, as well as the people on the other side, so that expectations are met a long way. You talked about some things to avoid, and we talked about maybe not going to the places that you should be visiting. Let's talk a little bit about pitfalls to avoid. And I have a list of about 5, but let's talk about your reputational issues. Ryan, do you want to start with talking about that?
Yes, for sure. I think this is really important. I think especially for prominent schools, we want to make sure that any gift that we receive has been fully vetted and it's not going to come back to haunt us. So for us, we've established something called the International Gift Review Committee, that anytime someone internationally wants to make a gift of over $500,000, they have to be researched more fully and officially voted on by a committee of people that includes some development people and also some people from other parts of the university, so that we're all in agreement that we'd be comfortable accepting this gift and it being known that we accepted this gift if it ever came up that way.
Yeah. Do you guys have kind of an ethics clause in your reputational issues? And we'll talk about gift policy, acceptance policies as well. So let's say you do accept that gift, and then 6 years later, you find out this person did some reprehensible things. Do you guys have, or are you thinking about putting something in your policies about once you have named something or you've set up a scholarship or accepted this money, what that looks like down the line in terms of that person's reputation linked to your institutions? Are your schools looking at that at all, or do you have that?
We have something in our gift agreement on the front end that just sort of lets people know that all naming opportunities, at the end of the day are not, perpetual, right? That it's always up to sort of the university to either not grant an opportunity to name something or to change that down the road. And so there's some language in our gift agreement about that.
Oh, good, good. I think some organizations are just starting, especially smaller and local organizations are just starting to grapple with that. So it's good to know that you do have that in your international gift policy. And you also talked about ways to accept funds overseas. And I know some people, there are some countries that, mainland China, for example, where it's a little bit more difficult to make gifts from an account in China, from what I understand. So some people do have, money in accounts in other places. But in terms of your international gift policy, how does that look different, perhaps, from your, mainland gift policies? Brian, do you have anything on that?
Well, I mean, for us, reputational issues are important for domestic donors too, of course. But for us, we have a higher threshold in terms of when we'll consider a gift, when we have to have an official vote on a gift if it's a domestic donor. So the issues around getting money to us, vary so widely by each country that each one's a little quirky. But oftentimes these donors are pretty sophisticated in their own financial matters, and so maybe they're based in mainland China, but they have accounts in Hong Kong, and they'll be giving your gift through their Hong Kong accounts because that's easier and to transfer. Yeah. So you just have to sort of be ready for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Another pitfall that we also see in independent schools is admissions. People wanting to give you, a beautiful, large transformational donation right before their child applies. So what's your policy on how to avoid that pitfall?
For us, it's pretty easy. We say, look, there's no connection between giving and admissions, and that ends the conversation. People will often come back and say, no, really, what's the amount? And I say, again, there's no connection between admissions and giving, and so eventually they get the message, and that ends that aspect of the conversation.
Yeah. And this is Ryan. Ours is, we do the same thing. We actually do have a formal policy that we will not accept a gift in the year before someone may have an admissions case. And I think that's helpful for the fundraiser because then you can, that is, just backing them up in what they're saying. So people take it seriously that, because trust me, sometimes I feel like I'm an admissions officer when I'm on the road. This comes up so much. So you just need to be prepared with a very, very clear line in that you won't cross because it'll come up a lot.
Yeah, it does. And I think, like you said, Ryan, people say, oh, there's someone from this university, and then you wind up, you need to meet this person. And, of course, they come telling you about the wonderful virtues of their child.
Right.
Yeah, we talked about lack of buy-in from leadership. Really, it's important to put your plans in place and make sure that your leadership understands the why this is important to do this. Any wisdom about how to gain the buy-in from leadership? I know that's a subject we could spend an hour on itself. Getting good data and contact information, pitfalls to avoid. That's just good advice. How do you reach them? What's the best way? How can they reach you? I know a lot of schools are starting to put their international telephone number on there and their wire address on their information, to make it easy. We do have some resources here that's in your packet on ways that people can, they have some publications on how people can give money to you and how you can set up some offices offshore that we talked about some of you have done. Number one advice before we get off the phone. Ryan, if you wanted to leave our audience with one bit of advice, what would that be?
I think it's just I wouldn't start down a path unless you can really follow it all the way through because it isn't going to be a quick return. I think it does pay off in the long run, and we've seen huge results from international fundraising. But you have to go into it with a clear idea that this is a long-term commitment and that you're going to stick through it, and you're not going to get discouraged if you don't get $1 million gift in the first year.
Great. Yep, absolutely. Steve, what's your number?
I think a theme that's emerged here today is managing expectations, and so managing expectations internally on your campus if you're affiliated with a school, and externally, managing expectations of what people can expect out in the field. And so I think it's so critical just to be upfront with folks and say, look, this is what we hope to accomplish. It may take some time, but this is what we're planning to do. Excellent,
excellent. We're running out of time. There's some final thoughts on this slide that we're grateful to Columbia Global Centers, Columbia University, for giving us. We're going to let our audience, look at that when they're putting their plans together on their vision, and how they're going to put their plan together from a strategic level down to the practical. That's going to be in your handouts. I'm sorry we didn't get to any questions, but we will have a follow-up to this, and we'll take your questions and we'll put it back to the audience. We'll have a blog that will have some of the experts from today, perhaps, and from our research that will answer your questions. And we'll keep the conversation going. And I really appreciate so much your time, Ryan and Steve. This has been very enlightening for me, and I trust it was for the audience too. And I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca just to wrap things up.
Thank you for everyone who joined us today. Our next webinar will be the part 2 of our fundraising communication series. It's going to be noon on December 14th, and we'll be talking about messaging for donors. You are able to register for that at campbellcompany.com. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email Shoshana directly. Shoshana, you want to move to there you go, thank you. At shoshana.grammer@campbellcompany.com. Thank you, everyone, and you all have a great day.
Thank you all very, very much. Bye-bye.